Welcome back to another episode of Raising Tech. I am so excited for today's guest. His name is Stefano Selorio, who is the founder and CEO of Carevocacy, an ed tech company that helps older adults be tech savvy. Carevocacy's latest product, Oppo, is a text-based digital health literacy coach that's powered by AI. And before we kind of get into it, I just want to share how I know Stefano. Our first time ever meeting, he learned out it was a conference, gosh, a couple hours away. He dropped everything, hopped in a car, and met me at a strange hotel. And ever since then, there's been a friendship, a mentorship. I've just been really excited about everything that he's done along the way and really excited to jump into everything and a little bit of anything here today. So, Stefano, thanks for joining me here today.
Yeah, I was, what's crazy? We've known each other for what, about 6 years now, probably 5 or 6 years. Like, even just like when you first talked to me about your first child. And so I was like, it's crazy how much we've known each other. Yeah. You make it seem like I was trying to stalk you or anything. Okay. You had told me you were there and I just happened to show up and it wasn't too far and it was a conference here around in Miami. So look, from then on, I'm so happy that we've known each other. You've been not necessarily just a friend, but really a mentor in navigating the senior living and tech space of everything. I Before I go into a little bit about that, I did want to contest something that I heard from a different interviewee that you were talking to, our good friend Kyle Ren. Okay. In that episode, he claimed to be your best friend in the industry. I just want to say, does Kyle Ren have like a trophy that says Matt's second best friend? I don't think so.
Wow.
Like,
Wow.
does the guy have this? Did I get this trophy just for this podcast? Maybe, but this proves it even more.
I'm gonna start
Of
charging people for claiming to be my best friend now. I feel like there's some money to be made there, but that is too funny. Well, I'm a little taken aback, but hey, we want to
I
start
was
this episode engaging. I love it.
Yeah, I was waiting to pull this out. Yeah. So, anyways, love Kyle, by the way. So I hope if you see this, that'll be so funny. But yeah, thank you so much for that introduction, and happy to be here, Matt. I've been working on Carevocacy for about 6 years now, and we've served over probably 23,000 older adults, those who were under Medicare Advantage in senior living, value-based clinics, and those who participated in a lot of nonprofits and community-based organizations. So we definitely have been around and served a lot of people, and I'm so excited because we're in this new era of digital literacy and digital health literacy where we're using AI as this tool to kind of scale the work that I think a lot of people should have access to. So, yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And it's been really cool to kind of see some of those stories. And I've even used it and it's been super helpful to me. And, Stefano, I know we talked a little about Carevocacy, but what's your story and really what led you
Mm.
to start Carevocacy, gosh, 6 years or so ago?
Yeah, wow. I think it goes back even before launching Carboxy. When I was even interested in the aging or in age tech space, my family and I were caregivers to my grandma, and we still are to this day. So it's been about like 8, 9 years. I feels like 10, to be honest with you, of being family caregivers to my grandma who's living with Alzheimer's. And at the time, I was actually in college, and that affected a lot of the decisions I had to make on prioritizing whether her care, my education, my career. And sometimes life throws challenges and opportunities at the same time, and I really decided, what, I'm going to work with the cards that I was dealt with. And I knew I was going to be a caregiver for a very long time. I knew I still wanted to go to school or at least find some sort of career, and I just realized, like, let me try to see if I can meld the two worlds. And that's where I was like fell in the love of like working in technology for older adults and trying to figure out exactly what was needed in the industry. And I think for a lot of us, like, I sometimes end up being the guy that like gets used to ask about technology questions all the time. Like, we've either done that for our parents, our grandparents, or just even like our friends. And I looked into that space and I realized, like, maybe this is the best way for me as someone who's a newcomer into the space to just enter and just to learn and see how it worked. And that's a little bit about my story of like why I started in this first place. Of like, I think it really comes from a place of not only as a real caregiver and a current caregiver, but also a technologist, and like looking at technology as a way to not necessarily replace things, but more so to help people scale the work that they're doing and ultimately measure those things.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think it's such a needed thing too, right? In terms of like what I've seen even with my own loved ones and kind of the digital literacy there. I mean, my mom still calls me when she doesn't have the right input on the TV. Hopefully she's getting a little bit better with that. But it's been really cool to see your journey. And I was thinking back too, like you should have a trophy for the person that's filming the most TikToks over the years. So props to that. We'll have to work on that outside of this. And now I'm curious about Oppo, right? So,
Yeah.
Carevocacy's new AI product, AI, the buzziest of buzzwords out there. But can you kind of walk us through what exactly is Oppo and how does it work as a digital health literacy coach for older adults?
Yeah, so before I even get into exactly how it works, I want to paint a picture to our audience here today and really kind of demonstrate like how digital literacy normally works in the real world without AI, right? I think what traditionally happens is that when we try to provide someone some sort of education about technology, it's usually like that one-on-one approach, that group class that we typically do, which is still very important to this day. But what typically happens when it comes to those rooms or situations is that people who are not able to join or not physically able to join are sometimes left out of that conversation. Sometimes people are not comfortable in that kind of environment to ask questions because they might be looked down upon about those questions. And sometimes how do you like really answer the needs of especially older adults who may be curious outside of the classroom setting or outside of that private tutoring setting? And so that's kind of like really the problem that we were trying to solve of like how do we not only make it scalable, not only make it measurable, but ultimately accessible for folks who are just like lifelong learners about technology. And you'd be surprised, like technology, opens up doors more than just like how do I use the iPhone. I think it ultimately creates opportunities like job opportunities. I think there's some older adults that we worked with that ultimately was seeking out, entrepreneurship through using technology. And you had mentioned like content creation. We had some older adults that were able to learn how to navigate TikTok to create content about themselves. So those are just kind of the fun things that I think traditional ways of digital literacy can do. And I think for what we were deciding to build with Oppo AI, it was more of like how do we supplement the ways that people are currently receiving this education and then helping those who are delivering it as well. And it's very simple. They actually just go on our website or they work with one of our partners like Parasol to kind of really sign up, put in their phone number, email address, and then from there, within 60 seconds, they receive a text message from our phone number and they can ask questions to that phone number 24/7 without the fear of judgment and ultimately just be curious and just ask questions on the go. That's really it. We use SMS because we feel like it's a more accessible approach. There's no need to download an application for it. And like I think it's amazing because we get to see these like conversations where I think a lot of older adults know that it is an artificial intelligence tool, but they feel a little bit more expressive than normally what they would do with someone who they might lead on to. And I think that's a really interesting thing to see, especially in senior living, especially with older adults.
Yeah, I would agree. I think what I love about it, and I've tried to break it many times here, is the SMS-based platform because I just think it kind of fits into a way that a lot of people are using technology already, right? There's not an app you have to download. There's not something you need to sign up for. Well, originally to get access to it, you do, but it's not that difficult. But then the SMS, I think, based platform just makes it easier for everybody and anybody. And I'm wondering from like your point of view, because like we talked about in the beginning that you've worked with like Medicare Advantage plans and senior living communities. Like how do you and how does like Oppo integrate in those environments and what kind of partnerships have proven most impactful to you in your offering here?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we always like to focus on is like meeting people where they're at. And I think the first things that we did when we first launched Oppo was like work with community-based organizations. And these are typically nonprofits, groups that either have been doing amazing work to serve older adults who are needing resources, from the community. And typically what happens is they don't necessarily know where to tap into those resources because either they don't have the literacy to address those things. And so one thing we did was partner up with local nonprofits that were serving older adults, and we've seen so much of an impact of like just giving them that access to information that they never thought of. I think what's so great about the tool that we're building is almost like democratizing the world around digital literacy and AI access, especially to a population who sometimes we deem to be like maybe they're not look they might be interested into it, but you can see the trends more than ever. I'm sure you know too, Matt, of like how many people really, really love AI and kind of want to learn more about it and how to best use it for their case. But even then, like we work with underserved populations, we work with Medicare Advantage, we work with senior living residents as well. We work with a variety of types of older adults, different backgrounds. I think what's so great is that because the tool is delivered through SMS, it speaks in multiple languages to be able to, accommodate those different types of learners. And it's not really trying to be annoying. It's trying to be very reactive to what are those questions and the things that they're trying to look at. So I think that's kind of what's amazing about the tool. I'm excited more of like how it can be integrated with some of our partners because again, we've made it so easy for not only the front line of users, but then also with the people that we work with as well.
Yeah. No, and I agree. And I think when I look at a lot of these things of where it fits in and how it can be helpful, like to your point of like where AI is being used, there's too many people I talk to, they're like, we want to use AI. And I'm like, where do you want to use it? And they're like, we don't know. So it's kind of like, okay, well, like the way I look at it is, okay, you can use like AI in solving a problem. So what's a current problem? Or use it as like kind of an educational coach that's simple to use, right? I think too many times we tend to overcomplicate things. And I think the ability to do stuff like this and even get questions on the fly or things you're not sure with, I think it's super beneficial. Like earlier today, I had to put up Christmas lights, and I'm asking ChatGPT, how do I properly use this ladder that I got that has like 26 different ladder settings? So it's just kind of, not so much on the technology education piece, but more home improvement, which I've been using AI too much for. Yeah, don't tell my wife that, but yeah.
I would say that it doesn't have to be necessarily tech related, right? It's more about like daily living activities. If you think about it, that term that we hear a lot, especially when it comes to older adults, it's like how do we kind of maneuver life and the things that we have to do. I was just going to mention that one of the craziest things that I've experienced working with this tool is seeing how they're almost like taking ownership of like this thing that they wanted to like work on. We would probably it would taking them like probably like months to get onto because one they would either visit, traditionally what would happen, especially with some of our learners, is that they would do research with their friends and their family. And usually typically friends and family might take a long time to respond to that, or they may get a little bit annoyed by that, or they might go to traditional means, which is go to a local library or go to a local university. I think what's happening here with the tool that we built is like giving them the tools already. And I think I've talked with this with you, before and with other people. I think we're like the one of the first tools I think that's really front facing for older adults and for residents, instead of just being this platform at the back end where we say we're using AI, but it doesn't really touch necessarily the end user, which are older adults. And we've made a safe environment for folks to test out those questions, to be curious, to be able to know that this is built of not only the heart of a current caregiver, but in partnership with a bunch of organizations that understand that we need to deliver AI in a safe and kind space.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point because yeah, so many times, and I see like all these technology providers out there, right? And they all boast about their AI, but it's all on the back end, right? And they talk about resident engagement being AI, but it's really just allowing the staff to like help connect people and all that sort of stuff, but not necessarily putting the AI in residents' hands. And it's funny because I'll go to some communities where the residents are like chomping at the bit to get access or like talking about ChatGPT and
Yeah.
almost sometimes more forward along in terms of their thinking than some of the staff at times. So it's kind of this happy medium of what that could look like.
Yeah, I would describe it as give someone a canvas and the paintbrush and the paint and just let them make the art on their own. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing a lot of folks who I feel like we're the paintbrush and like giving them the tools to basically create that picture. And funny enough, they can create a picture now with AI as well too. So I just think it's a really, really cool thing to witness and to be part of, especially in this new age of AI and older adults.
Yeah, no, I love that. And now I know, so we've recently started working together and we've piloted Oppo, the couple Parasol Alliance clients that are utilizing our tech at home service. I'm just walking, can you walk us through how that collaboration came together and really how do you envision the future of it looking from your end? And of course, I'll share my thoughts too, but you go first.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, we're not here to necessarily replace or make any changes to traditionally how I think a lot of older adults like to take in education. I think it is so important for them to have that trust built with someone who can help them navigate through that. And that's what you call digital navigators. And you can call them, your Paracel's Tech at Home instructors. We call them digital navigators. We call them people who are just sometimes tech wizards or tech tutors. But that is still like an important relationship to have. I think what we're trying to help is supplement that relationship even more and build on top of it, especially when that tech tutor isn't with that resident anymore. And I think when we had that conversation about working together and seeing where we could better improve the resident engagement side of things and the resident experience of things. And we were really aligned, I think, with what Tech at Home is doing for communities. And I think we as a technology provider was really thinking about, okay, we want to work with a partner that already has those trusted relationships, and we could just be the person that helps you scale the work that you do. And I think there was an article recently that about a few weeks ago on McKnight kind of sharing a little bit about that pilot and this relationship we have. We are piloting Oppo in about two senior living communities right now and kind of seeing how they're using it. We have a few metrics that we're measuring. I'm happy to share as well too about that because we just finished our first month. So there's a little bit of like early quantitative and qualitative data that I'm excited to share because you can already see that, as I said, when you give someone the brush and you allow them to have the room to paint, there's so much art that you can see. And it's interesting enough, like from our data, we're seeing questions that are not even necessarily tech related. And I think that's like showing a little bit of like how the possibility of social connection can play into when you have a tool that is used for specifically around tech, but then you give them the room and the space to be creative about it. So yeah, I could go into a little bit data, but I want to hear your thoughts of like what do you think this tool can be used for, what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so, I think when I first started at Parasol, a little over a year ago, I set up a bunch of calls with what I would call IT technology innovation friendlies on the provider side, just to kind of hear about their pain points, what's working, what's not working, if they could wave a magic wand, and what would they fix. And everybody talked about the resident technology support. And I heard varying levels of excitement, of
Mm.
interest to support that from the staff level. I won't quote them directly, but someone had basically said that, hey, don't get me wrong, we love the residents, but if we started taking their tech tickets, we're going to be in each of their rooms for 45 minutes, just, hearing all their stories. And hey, Matt, I love to hear that, but like we've got other things we got to get done. And the more and more people I talk to really just made it apparent that there's this huge gap in terms of like resident technology support and what that is going to look like and what's that going to evolve. And I know we've got the tech at home program, but what I really love too is kind of the blending of helping some of those technology and then also kind of the AI, which a lot of people, again, the buzziness of it is just kind of like overwhelming and nauseating at times. But I was looking for like a simple AI to kind of help with some of this stuff. And that's what, and it kind of worked out great that, we had this long standing friendship where, and,
Second best friend, by the way. But
second best friend. I mean, granted, I did never drove Kyle home to his hotel in downpour rain, which I think I'm still nervous about. But yeah, no, and I think it was a
and I still
combination
have
of
your
those.
coat, by the way.
You still have my coat. Sweet. Thanks. I forgot about that. But I think it's just like a combination of a few of those things that really brought it together that I was excited to like get it in residents' hands and see
Yeah.
if it, because a person can be there so many hours per day, but if you kind of have this tech assistant 24/7, technology questions happen all day, every day, right? And
Yeah.
just trying to give people that friend in Oppo to make sure that they're set up for success was what I was really excited about. And I know you mentioned the data. I would love to like hear more about like what you're seeing so far.
Yeah, one thing I was gonna touch on what you just said. I come from a family with like healthcare background, And one of the things that we definitely support is around ways to prevent certain things, right? And I think a lot of people don't understand when it comes to technology issues. We tend the typical thing that we do is just we fix it up for them, and it's a really band-aid solution for helping older adults, I think. And so our hope and goal for this tool is to not necessarily just give them the band-aid solution, but to give them the tools to really just learn on their own. And I think that ultimately will reduce those tech tickets, right? But also reduce this frustration, not only on the resident and the older adult, but more so on the caregiver side, right? And the staffing side. I think that is like we tend to not necessarily talk about when it comes to like technology, education, or issues, is that those tiny little inquiries or requests can be a little bit reduced when you start to kind of give them the tools and empower them to learn about technology on their own. And that, again, it's not replaceable, to all these other ways to help them. But again, it just adds that little bit of thing that I think people can use AI for to help scale that. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the data because I'm really excited about sharing some of the things that we've seen in the first month of this relationship with Parasol. And again, if you've seen the article out there, we are working with two communities, Evergreen Oshkosh as well as Clark Lindsay. And so those are the two communities that we've seen that have been really great in adapting this technology. And I will say I have a few things I wanted to share because typically what we do is we separate the data in two categories, which is quantitative and qualitative data. So usually the quantitative part of it is like the number of users, the number of messages, the number of daily activity that comes from those text messages, and then the qualitative data is I think the most fun part of the data that I like to
Mm.
look at, which is like what are the questions, like what are they asking, how are they asking it. We're looking at the way that they're structuring their sentences, when are they asking those questions, which is so important. That's a combination of that quantitative and qualitative data, because sometimes you have people, we have residents are asking questions at 3 in the morning. And I think it's amazing of like, the mind never stops and never, stops learning. And I think that's great. So I'll share a little bit about some of the quantitative data a little bit. In the past like month, from October 1st to November 1st, we've seen a huge surge in messages, obviously up to around 32 to 100 messages total in that month. So on average, we're seeing about 1 to 2 messages every day. And then we're also seeing some residents really are more engaged with it when it's introduced to them in a classroom setting, but then they like when they're able to have it actually using it on their own time, right? They're not necessarily having to wait for someone to help them guide them through that. So we're kind of seeing that through the data. And then some, I'm looking at my notes right now, but some of the qualitative parts is obviously the basic technology questions about like how to use the iPhone, how to use AI. I think the most requested question we've had, and we talked about this before we recorded, is how to navigate their printer. And the printer is like the biggest thing that they're asking about. I think that's great because they're kind of like trying to figure it on their own, which normally what would happen is when you get a ticket request is they would have to go to their apartment and their place to fix it for them. And I've done that myself personally. But the fact that they're asking and how to navigate through that printer and talking about the model and making sure they're following the steps has been really cool to see. And then I think what we're looking at, and it's just like a little tiny, I would say hint to where this tool can lead to, is that we're also seeing a lot of questions around that are not about technology, but more so about like life, how to navigate a difficult conversation, how to make sure that they're asking the right questions to someone. And you would think that because of experience and friends and that they've had over the years, that they would not have to ask that. But we're seeing a lot of these kind of social connection types of questions that is very interesting to navigate through and learn from the data that we get from Apple users.
Mm, I love that. Yeah, and I think and that's what I always found with technology in here. Like the quantitative data is important. You should definitely be tracking that, but it's the qualitative and those stories that come out that are like the coolest part about it, I think. And it's so cool to kind of hear that. And I know we're going to be reconnecting here to kind of talk through that and continue to see some of this impact. And hey, it's funny to see the printers because, like, I know I've asked AI about my own printer at times when it doesn't work versus when it's working, and it's just a pain in my side all day, every day. I feel like because I still print stuff, believe it or not. And I'm wondering, like, even outside of Parasol, because you guys have obviously have helped over 23,000 learners. Like, are there any common questions or challenges you're hearing from older adults when it comes to tech and digital health outside of using their printer?
Yeah, I think the thing that we've been more focused on has really about giving access to older adults to their healthcare, their digital health. And so our focus is really more about digital health literacy. And some of the common questions we received is like, how do they navigate their patient portal, their telehealth, their Medicare or their insurance dashboard, without giving to any patient information to us, but they're just really asking about how they can best navigate that and access that information. So we're seeing folks who are like, getting connected with their digital doctor, their telehealth appointment because they're trying to ask these questions on how to best get online. I think we are seeing folks who, as I said, are entrepreneurs as well, or entrepreneurs at heart, but never really knew where to begin. So they're using Oppo as like, again, their consultant, right, to kind of navigate them through how to best approach this business idea or this marketing idea that they have. Or like, let's say they want to, do a social event with their friends and they want to have like a text message that kind of makes everything into one little easy way to send to them. They've used it for that. And so I think what's so interesting is even though we built this with the intention of just making it be about technology, as I go back to that kind of example of like when you give someone that brush and you give them the canvas, like they can paint a huge picture of whatever that is on their mind. And I think that's what we're really helping people out.
Hmm, I love that. Yeah, it's one of those things, to your point about like being a brush, right? It's like a tool. It's just another tool for people that they can do to be more present, feel more knowledgeable about their own life. I've seen even sometimes with using AI can help to eliminate some of those insecurities because it's almost like those, that person to ask. I remember when I first got access to ChatGPT, I was like, what the heck is an insurance premium? And please explain it to me because I feel like I still struggle with that all the time.
You're not the only one.
I know, I know.
To this day, there are older adults still ask that question.
Yeah. And I'm curious from your point of view, from like an outcomes perspective, because I think for the individual, it's
Mm.
pretty clear, right? Like for the end user of who's using that, how can they become more tech literate? But I'm wondering like where you see the value for organizations that serve them.
Yeah. One, I'm so excited because we were recently funded by the National Institute on Aging. And if you're not familiar with that, that is an entity under the National Institute of Health. And we were selected out of 200 applications, 21 companies that were there, those who either were starting their companies for the first time to those who have had a company for a while. And it's exciting because to be part of this NIA program, kind of gives a little bit of like an idea of like where we're heading and like making sure the technology that we're doing is evidence and research based. I spoke about our friend Kyle Rand, who has definitely been able to receive funding from NIH grants and opportunities. We're hopefully applying for those things. And I think once we have that opportunity to really seek out that, we'll be able to really understand the better outcomes that we're looking at when it comes to addressing digital health literacy or digital literacy for older adults. But when it comes to like residents and senior living or even just our community partners, I think what's so great about the data that we're collecting from these conversations, from these really, I think sometimes intimate, but also sometimes very, curious questions, is that our partners, our, senior living communities, or whether it be our paying customers, they'll be able to really understand how to best provide programming for this population. I think if you're able to see what's in the mind of someone, especially through a text, you'll be able to kind of create some sort of with enough data, be able to create some sort of idea of what is the best way to serve that person. I think what's interesting is, as I mentioned before, like we had a user that was texting our tool up to like 3, 4 a.m. in the night. I don't think it's very uncommon for a lot of residents because I'm sure people and even myself sometimes have questions, late in the night, trying to just figure out something into my head. And it's like those are things that you can't necessarily track in some sort of other way. And I think that's what's so cool about this tool is that we can do that.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think too, one of the things you didn't mention, and I'll say it for you, because like I think a lot of these tech questions are falling on staff today, right? Like needing
Mm,
help with all this stuff and time. it's one of those things that everybody wishes they have more of. And I think there's an opportunity as more and more residents are moving into these communities with the tech appetites only increasing every single day and the tech expectation, right? It's moving from a must have then a nice to have. And I just think like giving tools like this will ultimately set them up for success. So you can, again, focus on some of those things that allow you to be successful in your job. I mean, I don't think you want to necessarily teach everybody how to, upload photos from their phone or setting up their
Yeah,
printer every single day. And I've heard even situations like this, like giving tools like Oppo or Tech at Home can save some like key staff time, anywhere from like 20 to 30 hours a week. I mean, could you imagine half your week doing resident tech tickets? Like it's
yeah.
just kind of blows my mind with that and the impact that it can have.
Yeah, I think ultimately, again, it's bettering that resident experience, bettering that staff burden, especially when it comes to folks who have to be the one in charge of addressing those tech tickets or tech issues. And ultimately, I think you're helping that resident to be a little bit more engaged with the community because they can use those tools that we talk about, those platforms that a lot of these communities are introducing, whether it be the activities platforms, whether it be the calendar, the food platforms, all those kind of things I think involves a certain digital literacy that's expected out of those residents. And so how do you bring them along is by giving them some sort of tool to kind of educate them through that. And so yeah, that's kind of like the outcomes that we're looking forward to as we try to work with more senior living communities.
Yeah, I love that. And obviously, you're clearly thinking for the long term here. Like, where do you see
Mm.
AI and digital literacy going in the next 3 to 5 years, especially for some of the aging populations?
Yeah, I would love to claim that we are the aging AI assistant for all older adults. I think we're getting there. I think because again, you have to think about like there are few providers that are really putting putting the hands and really just putting AI into the hands of older adults as their first priority versus rather than just be a back end thing, right? And so I think it'll be interesting to see in the next 5 years of seeing where this tool is building upon just not only technology literacy, but really using it as a tool that could really help assist and make decisions for older adults. But in this grand scheme of like how AI and it affects aging, I think ultimately we need to go back to just looking at the drawing board and seeing like what are the just tiny little pain points that we still see, especially in senior living or serving care for older adults, or let's say community-based organizations. How do we just like automate it just by a little bit through the use of AI? I think that's what's so exciting about the tools that we're seeing right now. And then also, I highly encourage people to kind of build solutions like what we're doing right now, so that way it still not only empowers those staff, but also empowers the residents at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that. And I would say too, I mean, based on what I've seen, I would say, I mean, you guys are definitely on the path to that. I think there's a huge opportunity out there. And, I think there's got to be content and just like a curation tailor made to an older adult user, right? And making sure they're getting the right information, not the wrong information. Because I know, there's some information being out there from some of these other LLMs that just aren't, hey, I wouldn't want my grandparents to be hearing some of that stuff.
Why I'm like encouraging, all different types of parties in the spectrum of aging to be part of the conversation about AI, because we're working with you guys as a technology distribution partner. You've done amazing work in communities and helping people with their IT. We've worked with community-based organizations. We've worked with Medicare. We're trying to bring all these partners together so that we can build an environment that is, I said, safe and caring and really empathetic about the aging population. Because when we leave it to folks like that don't work with older adults or are not necessarily caregivers to older adults, we tend to create assumptions that is so harmful, especially when it comes to AI. And I can talk a lot about like what happens with what's been wrong with AI and how it's hurting people. But I think what's so interesting about the tool that we're building is a simple way to just give them a fighting chance, to just give them an opportunity to open those doors. And that's why I highly encourage, like, if this kind of episode encourages you to partner with an organization like ours or even with Parasol, because that's our motto. Like that's our thing that drives us a lot of the work that we do, is that we can build a tool that's safe for people to use.
Yeah, I love that. And for listeners who want to support or get involved or even learn more, what's the best way to connect? What's the best way to connect with you or explore working with Carevocacy?
Yeah, I mean, the best way is definitely my email, which is stefano@carevocacy.com, or as Matt and I connected for the very first time on LinkedIn. So that's the best way to really go and check out the work that we've done. I share a little bit about not only my journey as a founder in the space, but also a technologist, but then also as a caregiver, because it really is that's where a lot of my decisions come from. It's just making sure I have the mindset and the perspective as someone who's currently taking care of an older adult. And you can definitely check out our website, carevocacy.com, as well as our social media channels. That's the best way to know a little bit more about Apple.
Awesome. Well, for those of you, if this is your first introduction to Stefano, up and comer, if not already here in the industry, and appreciate you making some time today, my friend.
Yeah, no, hey, as I said, Kyle cannot compete against this. So I just, for your listeners who are not watching the video, I'm holding up a trophy that says Matt's second best friend, by the way. But I'm so happy to be here. And I just want to say, if you have not had a chance to meet Matt, he is a generous person, like the most generous person I've ever met in this industry. Like it's crazy how I've just I'm proud of you, seriously. So I'm glad to be here, and I can't wait to share more about the progress that we've made in our pilot partnership with Parasol.
I love it. Well, thanks again, Stefano, and we'll have to get you a real trophy here for next time. So thank you.
Okay, awesome.
You can find us online at raisingtechpodcast.com, where you can see all of our episodes and contact us to provide feedback or submit an episode idea. We are on social media everywhere at Raising Tech Podcast. If you enjoy Raising Tech, please leave us a review and share with a friend. Music is an original production by Tim Riesig, one of our very own Parasol Alliance employees. As always, thank you for listening.